to deal with this issue. What is this Jewishness? Why is it that that I can enter into a conversation with a conservative rabbi, a nice conversation with him, and I'll feel like a clever shop. We're both Yidden. We're both Jews, right? But if you put me in the same room with a Jews for Jesus guy, I remember once I was going to university. I was standing there hitching a ride to York University, and the guy who ran Jews for Jesus wanted to give me a lift, and he stopped to give me a lift. And the truth is, I don't remember what I did, but I have a feeling I did not go in his car. I have a feeling like, I'm sorry, my thumb's, I'm just walking around like this, but my thumb out, but no lift, right? You know what I mean? Like, hey, but and the truth is today, I mean, you think about this. If you reform rabbi, a conservative rabbi, you talk with him. I just did a program in Hamilton. They had a program, and they needed an Orthodox rabbi to be there. The truth is the community wanted an Orthodox rabbi, and I became the volunteer of the Orthodox rabbi because it was important to have the Orthodox voice at this program. And there was a Reform rabbi, a conservative rabbi. It was very, very important to have an Orthodox voice at this program. And it was about homosexuality in Judaism. It was very important to have an Orthodox. And in certain ways, I was very happy I did this, because from what I heard, the feedback was that people said they came in saying they were almost adamant of, I thought I knew what the position should be. Most of the people in the audience were liberals and so forth. And now I see it's much more complicated, and there's a lot more issues involved. So I think what I did is I did something positive, Kiddush Hashem or whatever. But the point is when I'm there, right? Because they're a Reform rabbi, I talk to them. They're still Yidden, I feel a little camaraderie. You're Jewish, program is Jewish. They serve kosher food. But I'm telling you, if there was a messianic rabbi, quote unquote rabbi there, even if he actually was Jewish, right, I would not be friendly. You know what I mean? There's something inherent.
Do you agree with the line drawn?
The question is why.
Yeah,
that's the real
what
question.
I'm trying to understand.
Okay. So the fact is to understand this, there's two steps you have to take. The first thing is you have to understand how Jews responded to Reform Judaism. There's said that there were three basic responses to Reform Judaism in the 1800s, as personified by three of the Gedolim of the 1800s: the Chasam Sofer, the Malbim, and Shimshon Hirsch. The Malbim is the one who's sort of like, the Malbim actually lived in the Reform. He was actually had to take on the Reform and so forth, because where he was the rabbi in Romania, a lot of Maskilim Reform. In fact, there's a joke from the Maskilim, which were the enlightened ones, were always trying to catch him and joke around with him. So one of them came over to him and said, Rabbi, it says when a rabbi walks into a room, you're supposed to stand up. It says when a dog walks into the room, you're supposed to sit down. What happens when a dog and a rabbi walks in the room at the same time? So Malbim, without missing a beat, says, I'm not sure. Let's both go over to that room over there and see what happens when the people walk in. When we walk in. Okay. Anyways. That was a tremendous line. Okay. Anyways, but the Malbim's approach was, you gotta learn. We just have to totally learn. That's what Malbim wrote volumes on the Chumash and Daf. We just have to be knowledgeable. His theory is you fill yourself up and you overflow to affect the people. That was the Malbim's approach. It was very much you learn so you can affect others. Okay. But the major battle was between the Chasam Sofer and Shimshon Hirsch. The Chasam Sofer believed you entrenched. Okay? Chadash Asur Min the Torah, you entrenched. Okay? In other words, you got to protect the line. You got to keep everything out, and so forth, because you got to draw the line. Shimshon Hirsch believes that the way you relate is through outreach. That's why he was the chief rabbi of Moravia, and a small little congregation in Frankfurt, which was dying, right? It was like...
Why? Because it was assimilating?
It was assimilating like crazy. And they wrote a letter to him and said, we need a rabbi, will you be our rabbi? It was like writing to the chief rabbi, hey, we're in Hoboken, please be our rabbi, you know? We got a small little shul, you know? And Shimon Shofar Hirsch got this and said he felt it was a calling. So Coach Baruch Hu telling him this is what you should do. So he left his major. He was a member of the parliament of Austria. He was a very chashuv rav. He left to become the rabbi of the small congregation in Frankfurt am Main, and from there began the Kiruv movement. So Shimon Shofar Hirsch created a whole concept of Torah and Derech Eretz and so forth, and completely built up a whole new community, reaching out to people. His Horeb was a book basically explaining Judaism to less, you know, it was written to try and explain Judaism. His 19 letters to try and explain Judaism, but basically outreach to the world. But Shimon Shofar Hirsch, that was his perception. What was his idea? He said, they're Jews. Okay? So as long as they're Jews, I'm going to outreach to Jews. Very powerfully saying, he's born to a Jewish mother, they're Jews, I'm going to relate to them, and so forth and so forth. But the thing that people don't recognize with Shimon Shofar Hirsch is he was very, very intolerant of other definitions of Jewishness. He had nothing to do with Reform Judaism or Conservative Judaism. In fact, one of the things he did when his community got stronger is he petitioned the German government to be recognized as a separate community. Okay, because in that time every community, every ethnic community or religious community was its own entity. He said, I don't want to be part of the general Jewish world. I want to be part. We have our own Jewishness. Okay, I have no tolerance for anything in the Jewish world. Okay, outside of Torah. And he was very adamant about that. Had nothing to do with any non-halachic Jewish organization. In fact, Mark Shapiro, in his book on the Fri May, points out that the Hirschian community did not join forces with the other Jewish organizations in Germany till 1934 or 1935.
Is this the Mark Shapiro here?
The Mark Shapiro from University of Scranton. He wrote a book on the Fri May, on Yichil Yaakov Weinberg. It's not for he's a professor in the University of Scranton.
There's Mark Shapiro here.
He wrote a book on the Fri May, Yichil Yaakov Weinberg, and he says in it he says that he was talking about Germany and so forth. He says that the Hirschian community did not join in with the rest of the Jewish community to fight the Nazis politically until 1934 or 1935, because they would have nothing to do with a non-halachic Jewish community. It's a very powerful definition. So one definition, which is the Hirschian definition, is there's one definition of Jewishness. There are Jews who are outside the pale. We will relate to them, take them in, but we will have no recognition of a Jewishness that's not halachic.
Can I ask you something here? We talk about orthodoxy being halachic Judaism. What about congregations, though? Like, where do you put congregations like that are conservative, that are basically, except for the fact that they're mixed seating? They're like the rabbis have Orthodox and they're halachic Jews. And whatever, are they still in that category that they're outside? Like, how do you, is it so black and white?
I think the Shimshon Farshah would clearly be. The fact is a rabbi, you see, you're getting into technical issues there. A rabbi who's Orthodox, who's in a shul like that, it might be that he gets a psak to be in that shul. Okay, and since he's in the shul, right? You have a psak. But the fact of the matter is I remember once speaking at the Neriver, because the Neriver is a synagogue that calls itself egalitarian Orthodox. Right? They were an Orthodox and they decided to bring in women and so forth. And what happened was they were going through a whole issue of how to relate to gays and gay couples and so forth and so forth. The issue was, should we allow gay couples to have to mark their events by Kiddush. Susie and Debbie have been together for 6 years. They want to hold a kid, on their anniversary. So they wanted to hear what an Orthodox response was. So I agreed to go down there and talk to him. I went in with an agenda. I went in, I opened up, and I said, let's first face it, you guys are not Orthodox. Okay? And supposedly it was like, no, I thought we're egalitarian Orthodox. No such thing. Doesn't exist. You're not Orthodox. What you are is a Reform temple who chooses to follow Orthodox practices because it comes down to philosophy. The truth is it comes down to philosophy. So either you're running a conservative synagogue, right, who violates its own principles, or you're running a synagogue and say, listen, we really should be doing this, but we don't because we're choteh. Or if we say this is correct, you're not Orthodox. Now there are Rabbanim who go into the shuls because they say, listen, I'm willing to serve as people. But the fact is, people generally don't understand that. Conservative Judaism is not different than Orthodox Judaism because it doesn't have mechitza. Conservative Judaism is different than Orthodox Judaism because it doesn't have the same basic principles of faith of Orthodox Judaism. And it usually comes out in terms of the sitting together. That's mostly because, and this is that because most shuls were created that way, weren't philosophical anyways, or theological. Well, a little this, a little bit that. That's why there was actually, again, from the 1980s, there was another pamphlet put out by Reconstructionist Judaism. Pamphlet that said that really 80% of American Jews are Reconstructionists. Right? Actually, philosophically, 80% of American Jews are Reconstructionists. Okay? They don't go to Reconstructionists. And you know what's the strange thing about that pamphlet? Absolutely correct. Most Jews, if you really want to push them in terms of the theology, they're Reconstructionists. And that also applies to so many Orthodox Jews.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means. But they don't believe in a personal God.
Well, the Reconstructionism is actually a little bit different. It begins with not believing in a personal God. That was Mordechai Kaplan. But there are some Reconstruction rabbis who do now believe in a personal God. What it really means is you start with nationalism. In other words, where does your identity as a Jew start? Does it start with, I belong to the Jewish nation, I'm Jewish nationalist, and the way I express my Jewishness is through mitzvot, right? Okay, so like I'm Jewish, I feel part Jewish. The way I express it is by going to shul in Yom Kippur and fasting, right? And get bored over there because I don't know what they're doing, asking for tshuva. I don't know what that means, because nothing to do with God. Or if it does have something to do with God, it's because that's the way we Jews mark ourselves. And the truth is that there was a movie about someone's bar mitzvah, and it opens up. There was this movie about someone's bar mitzvah. We're going to do it better than the other one. It was a comedy, and it opens up by showing how different tribes have their rite of passage. Right, this one has that rite of passage. You have to go into the forest and do this. Our rite of passage is you gotta know how to sing Boo Ba Bee. That's what it is. We're nationalistic, and the way we do it is by expressing our Jewishness. Okay?
We had there was a fascinating book I read. I can't remember the name of it. It was written by a Reconstructionist rabbi in the States. A small book. It was made into a fictional tale about this student who befriends this rabbi. He's a Reconstructionist rabbi, and he goes there Shabbos, and his practices were totally Orthodox, and he davened 3 times a day, everything, but he had a different, and he talked about how he really believed that there was a God that created the world, because, he spoke about Einstein, how Einstein recognized that too, but basically there was no personal God.
Right, but that's not really. But the fact is, when this pamphlet says this, what it's saying is that most Jews, when they feel Jewish, the religion is the way they express their Jewishness.
Well, that's what he was doing.
Right. That's what it is. And the more Jewish you want to be, you want to wear a kippah. Right? Because I'm Jewish. But it's not because the other view of Jewishness, and this is the view that really was behind Shimshon Far Hirsch, is that first there's a God. I believe in God. God created a nation of Jewishness, and He told me I have to serve God as a member of this nation. It starts with God, okay, and therefore that's it. And therefore, if you don't have God, right, all the Jewishness doesn't matter. Okay, so the point is that what Shimshon Far Hirsch was so adamant about, and maybe it was an aspect that he was reading. He says, "I'll relate to Jews." But it starts with, I believe in God, and God defined this nation, and says that people of this nation have to serve Him this way. So you're a member of this nation. I'm going to welcome you so because you're a member of the nation. You're still a member of good standing because you're Tinnik Nishma. The Rambam says I have a mitzvah to love you and carry you and bring you back into the context of Torah. But it starts with God. But once you start creating a different Jewishness, I have no connection to that.
It's funny too because in that book there was some kind of justification for, despite the fact why it was good to daven 3 times a day and this and this and this, but it was a very weak reasoning. I couldn't, and it was so weak that I couldn't. I can't remember what it is.
The point is that most Jews are like this. The fact is that if you feel strongly, that's why in a certain way people don't recognize this. Is that the reason that many Orthodox Jews were not happy with Eretz Yisrael and finding of Eretz Yisrael is because the dominant motivation for Eretz Yisrael was that motivation. All the people behind Eretz Yisrael were motivated by the nationalism. And therefore Orthodox Judaism said that is wrong. That's why Shimshon Far Hirsch, and this will lead it to Rav Kook, this is what this article is about, the difference between Shimshon Far Hirsch and Rav Kook. That's why Shimshon Far Hirsch, when the Gouda was being formed, they approached the Frankfurt am Main community, and already this was way after he already passed away, but the Frankfurt community was, we'll join a Gouda as long as you have nothing to do with Zionist organizations that are not halachic. There was the fact that the Gouda took a very strong attitude of having nothing to do with the Zionist, World Zionist Councils or whatever it is. That was because of Frankfurt am Main, because of
Hirsch,
because of the Hirschians. The truth is that what it comes down to is that there is thought of it, we're going to reach out to Jews, but it starts with the recognition that our Jewishness comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's one of the reasons that the religious world was very, very angry with the Tzionim. It's also one of the reasons the Tzionim had no patience with religion. We had Shomer HaTzair, basically saying we had nothing to do with religion. It had something to do with the fact that nationalism was a major problem. They were actually redefining Jewishness in terms of nationalism.
And there was the religious Zionism,
though. So the problem is that religious Zionism was limited because they understood the problem. When you talk to the people who were behind religious Zionism, they were saying there is a value to nationalism from a Jewish perspective because, of course, Baruch gives a value to nationalism. But we understand that these guys are taking nationalism and running with it, so we don't want to be identified with them. And if it comes down to the fact that I'm going to be identified with that, absolutely with believing in Torah and have absolutely no nationalistic motivation, versus being chas v'shalom identified with them, I'm giving up my nationalism. Because the nationalism is problematic because it doesn't have a Kodesh Baruch Hu in it. Now, that was the attitude of most Orthodox Jews. Okay, things changed. One of the things that changed was Israel became a reality. But one of the major reasons things changed was because of the Raya Kook. Rav Kook came up with a new idea. He explained how the nationalism, he gave value from a religious perspective to the nationalism. Okay? And this is already starting the beginning of this Jewish identity thing. Rav Kook said that there is 2 covenants of being a Jew. There's Bris Avot and there's Bris Sinai. Bris Sinai is dependent upon following mitzvahs. And that's a special covenant with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But there's another covenant, Brit Avot, and that's inherent to being a Jew. Okay? And he said that the nationalism that we find in in Jews when they're coming back, and he looked at the Shomer Tzir, and they're coming back to build up land. He said, if they're coming back to build up Eretz Yisrael, that must be motivated by something good inside of them, a Jewish drive. And that's why Rav Kook really believes eventually all these people will do tshuva. But he felt that the drive had a positive side to it, because it was part of their inherent Jewishness which was coming out. It wasn't a drive to leave Jewishness. It was a drive to Jewishness. It was somewhat, overextended because they didn't follow Torah over it, but the drive itself was somewhat worthwhile, and it came from Brit Avot. So therefore, what happens is that there's an inherent Jewishness that is identified.
It'd be an interesting discussion once to see whether we think he was right or not. Like if there's so
right. The fact is there's issues, but the fact is what we're now seeing is that drive of nationalism does have a religious side to it. The point is our feelings of nationalism, we're basically said that is a quote unquote Yetzer Tov, because Kodesh Baruch Hu placed it inside itself because we have Brit Avot. Okay, and therefore that's it. And therefore there's again a dialectic, a tension, so forth and so forth. But the people who therefore what's happening is those people who are Jewish, or this new colloquial Jewishness. It's not. What is the definition according to Rav Kook of this colloquial Jewishness? It's an incomplete Jewishness. It's not. It's in other words. It's not that you're bringing in foreign ideas into it. In other words, if it's supposed to have this Jewishness is supposed to has 100 parts of it, you're creating Jewishness with only 32 parts. So obviously, if you create something with only 32, if you have 32 parts, it's going to be a different Jewishness. But the fact is though 32 parts all come from the 100 parts of good Jewish of the total Jewishness.
Isn't that better than nothing?
Yeah. So that's not if there's a problem with it. If you have 32 parts,
you can't sustain itself.
It's not what kind of question if it can sustain itself or not. The fact is, if I say you have to make a car, okay, I'm going to let you make a car. I'm just not going to give you a carburetor, tires, or a steering wheel. Can you make a car?
What's that?
Okay, so the point is that there was they're taking parts. So Cook said basically, but they still have an inherent Jewishness in them. Okay.
So what would be an attitude to a diaspora secular Jew who is not particularly Zionistic?
Well, that's something different. Then you have different definitions of Jewish and so forth and so forth. But his idea was that Eretz Yisrael was a powerful drive. But what he really said was that nationalism has a value to it. Okay, and it was that nationalism value. Shimshon Flores said basically it's belief in a Kodesh Baruch Hu that has to be a dominant drive in Jewishness. Okay, and then everything has to flow from it. So he took issues with people who were finding a different definition of Jewishness, which wasn't based upon the Torah beliefs. Rav Kook then threw us says, but wait a sec, what they're still driven by has value in itself, and eventually will bring them back. So there was a certain time. So therefore, Rav Kook was willing to work with secular Jews, right?
Was he sort of the father of I know Rav Soloveitchik was the father of the modern Orthodox. But the religious Zionist.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. He is the man behind religious Zionism.
What year again did he?
Passed away in the early 30s. Okay. What? Okay. But that's a tension. Now, you mentioned Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik brought this to a different level. And this is really something I didn't quote Rav Soloveitchik in this article, but you're already beginning to see some aspects of where Jews for Jesus is different, because they're bringing in foreign ideas. It's one thing to be reform and just leave out things. Another thing to bring in something foreign. Okay. Okay. But the thing is I gave this argument, but I think this is where I think Rav Soloveitchik makes an interesting distinction. He says the truth is there's two forces that connect a group. One he calls, I don't use this term in my article. The truth is I wrote my article, I wasn't thinking of the Rav, then I reread Kol David Fake, and I said I should have included in the article I wrote. But he uses a different language. He says there is, in a group, Rabbi Soloveitchik, in a group, there's a bonding of shared destiny and there's a bonding of shared fate. Fate. And he uses classically, Yitzhak Mitzrayim is the example of shared fate, and Kabbalat Torah is the example of shared destiny. What's the difference? Shared fate is exactly what it's saying. You share the fate of this group. What happens to the group happens to you. That's one definition of the group. It says that's what happens with Jews. If you share a fate, you share that everything that's happening to the group, it's going to happen to me. I'm with them, right? So that means that if there's an anti-Semite, I identify this group. I'm going to suffer with that, with the anti-Semite. I'm also going to, be happy if something, works out well. So the certain aspect of shared fate, the euphoria of many Jews after the 6-Day War, with the example of shared fate, the same way. But the truth is that a salvation does point out to the Holocaust. The Holocaust puts you together as a group because of shared fate. I'm putting my lot in with this group. What happens to this group happens to me. Okay? That's shared fate. Okay? It says that's a colloquial definition of Jewishness today. We're all sharing the same fate. But there's another level which he calls shared destiny. He says where's this group going? What's the objective of this group? Where are you going? He says that's Torah. Okay? Really, the Jewish world is supposed to have two bonds. The bond is shared fate, and the bond is shared destiny. But if people don't share the shared fate, the shared destiny, they still share the fate. And I extended in this article that idea to my understanding of where Jews for Jesus' problem is. A Reformed Jew, a Reconstructionist Jew, they're sharing my fate. They don't share my destiny. They don't share the objective, what I think this group is about. But they share my understanding of we're in it together. Okay? The point is, though, is that Jews for Jesus, he's not sharing my fate. He's actually sharing the fate with another group. Push comes to shove, he's really a member of the other group. Right? He's not with us. Now, people tiny with me, but Edith Stein. Edith Stein was this nun, obviously with a name like Edith Stein, you know what her background was. She was actually supposedly a philosopher and so forth. She became a Catholic nun, and she died in Auschwitz. And she's now going through the beatification process of the Vatican. And people say, hey, you see, they point to her and say, you see, shared faith, even if you're a Catholic.
She didn't choose it though, she was taken. She didn't say, I'm coming with you.
The point is but that still means shared faith. You're still there. My belief is exactly the opposite of what you said. My belief is that if Edith Stein wanted not to end up in Auschwitz, she could have made sure she didn't end up in Auschwitz. There's no way if she was sitting in some nunnery somewhere, right, and she turned to the church and said, hey, listen, I'm a Catholic now, I'm a nun, right, can you do something about it? I do not believe there's any way in the world the Nazis would have taken her.
You're saying that
she had this big issue of being Jewish at the same time. I think she went out of her way to try to get to Auschwitz so she could die and say, look, I'm a Jew, even though I'm a nun. Okay? In order to challenge this whole thing. Because in a certain way she wanted to say, hey, you see, and this is the point. The point is that some ways they might, people might do it, but the truth is that it's not a matter of your choice, it's a matter of reality. Is this your group? Is it not your group? Right? The Jews for Jesus guy, they can do all they want, they can wear tzitzis, but you're not really part of our group. You're not sharing my fate. You're with another group. The fact is that's my understanding of it. So, but the point is all of what I presented tonight is just simply to really point out the complexity of Jewish identity today. Complexity of the issues of Jewish identity and what we call Jewish unity. It's a tension that exists very much so in Israel. That's why you don't know what to do in Israel. If you get rid of Geras Kahalacha, basically, where are you going? You're getting rid of shared destiny, of Torah destiny, and basically you're letting Jewish identity just go fall apart. Because what's that? Let me just make because let me just give you one second. I just want to finish my point. Is that the fact is exactly because every one of these different groupings are now having different definitions. So if you don't have Geras Halacha, it's basically going to be totally like Hefkerveld. Okay? That's on one hand. On the other hand, Geras Halacha does not reflect the colloquial definition of the grouping anymore. So there's tension in this grouping because they're only really defined by shared faith, and Geras Halacha is actually the imposition of shared destiny on the group. So what were we going to say?
So there's a problem, though, it becomes so political because on the one hand, you've got this issue of what's left if you do away with Geras Halacha.
Right.
But then you have rabbis who will suddenly say that this Orthodox, respected rabbi, who gave all these conversions, suddenly we're saying that he didn't do it right. And that's already...
Right.
That's terrible. That's already really...
Right. That's a real problem because the fact is that shows the tension within Orthodoxy itself. It also shows the fact that...
contradiction.
It's a tension in Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy has different views of halacha. It works with the world of Elu ve'elu, which means that there's no one set halacha. Okay? That is...
with a boundary.
No, so
right.
that if it was only a tension, it would be a discussion as opposed
right.
to things becoming...
Right, that's exactly it. The fact
it's not a tension anymore, it's much stronger.
Yeah, you're right. The fact is that what I meant is that we don't know how to live with the tension of what Orthodoxy really is about. And therefore too many people, and this again it might be an aspect of Kirov, too many people don't understand the arguments. People say, if God said it, then it should be A or B. And to try to say something else, the way God expressed the Torah and so forth eventually led to 6 different opinions. And it's God's will that you have 6 different opinions. I don't get that. Well, that's a very sophisticated idea. And then you have to know how to deal with those differing opinions. And then you have to know how rabbis who share the differing opinions know how to relate to each other. Okay? And this rabbi says, I don't hold that person is a Jew according to this person, but according to that person he is a Jew. So you have this tension in halacha itself. Okay? This is kosher for me, not kosher for you. Okay? And it's okay for you to eat it, but it's not okay for me to eat it. Okay? And the idea, let's say for example in Lifnei Iver, that if you have a piece of meat that you hold is aser. Okay, and a person over there who holds its mutter asks you to pass this piece of meat. Okay, you're not over Lifnei Iver, because even though you hold its aser, that guy holds its mutter, so you're not causing him to do naver, because to him it's kosher. Now that's only his halacha. It's not someone who's not some reform rabbi saying I think bacon's okay. No, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about halachically. Hey, you hold this. That's why they say by Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, you had this case. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai would say, they tell each other, listen, this person over here, according to like in marriage, they'd say, Morin Yavamas says Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai basically says, okay, this woman over here, Liba to me, she's kosher, but according to you, she's a mamzeret, so you should marry her. The other way around also. They go around and say, listen, according to me, she's kosher, but according to you, you should marry her. The other way around. To me, she's a mamzeres, but to you, she's kosher, because you must like someone else. The fact is that kind of world, because we live in a world because there's too much black and white. Nothing infuriates me more than in Orthodoxy when a person says only one opinion. It's interesting because there's a thing on our blog about this exact issue, in the sense that when a person says the halacha is, that usually gets me upset if there's a spectrum of opinions, because that's incorrect. But for a lot of people, they feel they have to do it because it's simplistic. The halacha is the perspective. So that's the issue. But the truth is that makes more of a complication because Orthodoxy itself has an issue in terms of defining its Jewishness.
It's funny when we talk about Zionism and all that. I'm clearly very Zionist, but
right.
It's funny because even though I totally don't agree with it, it's for the first time in my life. The past couple of years, I understand that perspective of not of us, because you can see now I think so many of the problems we have is because so many people were brought up, they have no idea what their Jewishness means at all, and I think which can lead to a lack of Jewish dignity in the country, and a lot of things. I think so many of our problems are a result of that. The
problem again, using language of Rabbi Soloveitchik, my problems in Eretz Yisrael is that after coming after the Holocaust, we basically focused on shared fate. Right, and we've been there with the Russians and the Ethiopians, and the extension of that definition to anyone who thinks they're Jewish, shared fate. We're into it tremendously, but and also the survival of Israel itself, shared fate of the people in Israel. The problem is there's no concept of shared destiny. We don't focus on it, and then when we do focus on it, we'll say, well, we do it like it's like doing something ritualistic, which basically means, well, I'm waving the flag that I'm Jewish, but there's no idea of what is the concept I'm really striving for, right? In other words, in a lot of ways that we really focused, we're part of the group, we want to put that's the group we throw our lot in with, but the fact is, where's this group going? And that's the tension. And usually in answering that question, especially in the Kiruv world, is that the real sophisticated nature of this group, with differing opinions and a lot of disagreements and so forth and so forth, it's very difficult for people to understand what Orthodoxy is about. Okay? And this shared destiny, which is a destiny that's so multidimensional in its own right. So it's a very sophisticated shared destiny. And then when you take it beyond Orthodoxy, that's the real problem in the Jewish world today. There's a problem of shared destiny. We focus on shared fate. Okay, and we focus on Brit Avot without Brit Sinai, and we're very happy as he's a Jew. We're welcoming him. The point is if you're too open in saying, hey, we accept every Jew, and it's tremendous. The point is what about a standard? What about saying, hey, do something if you're a Jew, right? And once we start saying, hey, accomplish something, it's the same thing with let's say schooling or whatever. We want to be welcoming to everyone. Then you lower the standards and say everyone, right? If you have a point and say, hey, there's got to be a standard here, then it means some people aren't going to make the standard. It's an interesting perspective, but the point is that's a tension that now exists in the Jewish world. But what I was talking about is the value of unity. That's the issue that's really behind unity in the Jewish world, dealing with these tensions.
And the shared fate business in Israel is a huge problem. There's lots of soldiers who they don't know what they're fighting for, and they have rabbis in the army trying to explain to them Judaism, history. What are we doing here?
Yeah, but the problem, the further problem is, and this is part of the issue also, is that it's an outgrowth a little bit of weaknesses in Kiruv. You take some rabbis who see only one perspective of Judaism, and they come across and they try to explain Judaism to some guy who thinks totally different. Okay, and they only express their view of Judaism. So the guy thinks this is crazy, and therefore he's not even willing to listen to another Jew who's going to express a different idea of the destiny. And that's why it's so significant that you have to know different positions and different ideas. You have a guy who's... I'm talking within the Orthodox world.
Rabbis that are so corrupt and political, and it gives they have a bad impression.
But what I'm saying is something different. I'm trying to say that one of the problems is that I could be a very sincere person. We do mitzvahs for this reason. We do this mitzvah for this reason. That's I only quote from some rabbi, and I present this reason, that reason. A bunch of people think that that's all poppycock. I think that's ridiculous. That's total hogwash, right? And this rabbi says, no, you gotta believe. And then the guy goes, I remember this one guy. This guy was in yeshiva, and every yeshiva he went to, he was basically perceived to be an Eloi.
What is Eloi?
Eloi is a Talmudic genius. Remarkable. And somehow I met him. He was friends with a friend of mine, and we started learning a little bit together and so forth and so forth. And he started asking, he was already telling me some of the questions he was asking. He went to all these great yeshivas. He was asking this question. And he heard this reason, and he goes, whoa, rolled his eyes like it's ridiculous. And he wrote, this reason is ridiculous, and so forth and so forth. And he had this tremendous question. I went to my bookcase. I don't remember exactly what the question was. I went to my bookcase. I pulled something out by the Rav, by Rav Soloveitchik. I opened it up and said, read this. And the guy read it like, wow, he asked my question. And he's actually giving an answer. He's actually giving, like not necessarily I agree with him, he's actually giving an answer that makes, that shows some thought and some ideas and some working, right? And he says, I never heard such a thing before. This is true. In the yeshivas I went to, they think this was, never even heard this stuff. They just attacked me for asking the question and so forth and so forth. And I said, that's the problem. And the truth is, I said to other people, eventually what happened is that I was in the city, I left the city, and he was behind, and I met up again 5 years later or something, and he totally was not religious at all anymore. And still Jewishly conscious, but not religious at all anymore. And I said to someone, the yeshivas he went to are going to have a din cheshbon. Because they knew about the Rav stuff, and they knew the Rav's ideas. They should have recognized this kid was smart, he was a genius, he had philosophical questions, he needed to learn by the Rav. I remember saying this to someone I truly respect, and the person said to me, he said, you can also learn by Rav Yaakov Weinberg, right? I said, absolutely. Wasn't the Rav? He should have went to a philosopher, Yaakov Weinberg, right? Okay, the Rav Yoshe Ber Saleh, someone who asks those questions. No, but in some yeshivas, it's like, I'm absolutely right, or my sheet is absolutely right. They don't even know the spectrum, and the fact is that they're so like this remarkable article by Rabbi Berger, Rabbi Dr. Berger.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote the book about the Mashiachas, but he's also now the Dean of Rebbe, he's a big Talmid Chacham. He wrote an article on Jewish identity. Mm-hmm. And he basically argued, and I think he's absolutely correct, I felt this way in the Rambam for sure, that say you take the idea of Yiddish and Nishama. Right? He says there's clearly Shitas and Rishonim who do not believe in Yiddish and Nishama. So he points out, I don't necessarily like the way he says this, but he points out that people are having a really hard time with the Yiddish Neshama, which means an inherent difference of Jewishness, and Jews are inherently better than non-Jews. Sounds sort of racist. There are other Shisas and Rishonim you can present to this person, so you don't have to deal with that issue. Right? Does that,
not everybody believes that.
No, because there's different opinions. So he says, if you have a person who doesn't like Jewish Neshama, so there's other shitas. That doesn't have to be the breaking point of Judaism. Okay, I don't like exactly how he presented it because it's not really your choice who's right between Rishonim or whatever. But you should know there's a variety of opinions, right? But no, in our world today, there's people. This is what's said.
There's people also.
Okay, and nothing else. There's a whole spectrum of opinion. That rather than this guy's having a hard time with this, and rather than making that the argument, we have a bunch of other arguments. If a guy comes up to you and says, "Listen, I really have problems with Judaism because it's anti homosexual rights." Something I could do about it. Okay, I could talk about it from the fact that it's not fundamentalist, it's not similar to crazies and so on. It's a different influence. But at some point in time, it's like if you sit and say, "Listen, to be, I'm not going to be Orthodox because I have to eat bacon." Some point in time where I say, "Okay, there's no shita like that." But if you have a position and this person is having a difficulty with a concept in Orthodoxy because of this reason or that reason, and there's a whole spectrum of opinion, and some of the whole spectrum of opinion also disagree with it. You should know the spectrum and not make that the issue, right? We're not at that level anymore. No, this is it, because everyone's so narrow. This is it, and it's a real problem. Listen, but the underlying problem of all of it is the fact that these issues that we talked about tonight, people don't deal with it on a sophisticated basis. We don't really understand Jewishness, Judaism, what's going on there, what's really happening. We have emotions. We really don't investigate it. What is this Jewish group? Before you can talk about who is a Jew, what is a Jew? Right? All the arguments about that. People don't recognize, for example, that the patrilineal descent decision, okay, where they came out that you're born to a Jewish, you're Jewish, Reform Judaism, you're Jewish, you're born also to a Jewish father. So I remember talking to some Reform rabbi about it, an elder Reform rabbi. He said to me, he said, you really think we ever cared about whether you're born to a Jewish mother or Jewish father before? This like senior Reform rabbi, this was back in the 80s. He says, what do you think we used to do? If we had a kid in our school, in our temple, whose father was Jewish and mother not Jewish, was brought up as a Jew, i.e. Reform Jew, right? Was in our Hebrew school. What we used to do is when they had the confirmation, we said, this is also your conversion. They didn't mikveh anyway, so they reformed that. So when they gave everyone their confirmation certificates, they gave this kid another congratulations, you're a Jew, you have conversion. It says, why? Because we never wanted to cause any problems with the Orthodox. We don't want to come up with public statements that patrilineal descent. How did the patrilineal decision get passed? Because the Reform Rabbinic Convention that year, when it was passed, was on the West Coast. A lot of the senior Reform rabbis on the East Coast didn't bother showing. So you had a bunch of young Reform rabbis in the West Coast, right? And they were adamant, we're not going to kowtow to the Orthodox anymore. We want to be proud we're Reform. So they basically passed the convention. They said, we don't care about the Orthodox. We really hold this. I said, what was the real decision? It wasn't patrilineal, matrilineal. We don't care if your mother's Jewish or father's Jewish. If you're brought up Jewish, you're Jewish. If you're not brought up Jewish, you're not Jewish. Brother Daniel's not an issue. He's not a Jew. The Bishop of Paris, who was born Jewish, not a Jew. That was the decision. Just simply, you're not a Jew. If a person is born to a Jewish mother, like you run into people that finds out that their mother's mother was Jewish. So we have halakha. Is really a Jew, not a Jew, whatever. The Reform rabbi says, not a Jew. I remember once talking about it, he says, this is where we're more stringent than you. This person over here you say is Jewish, we say not Jewish. Why? Because she's brought up not Jewish. What? Because her mother's mother. It's a different definition of Jewishness. But no one wants to deal with that. It's what is a Jew?
Jew means, because it just means
right. Absolutely, whatever it means. But the fact is that that's the definition of Jewish. That's why who is a Jew? As long as we focus.
Not for everybody, by the way.
Right.
It's not so simple.
What? Well, like I said, there's Reform Jews, but there's much sophisticated Reform Jewishness and so on and so forth. Okay, but the fact is that but the point is that the fact is that what is a Jew is the real definition. That's the real issue. But never hear anyone talking about that. Who is a Jew? Born a Jew? What is a Jew? Have you heard anyone talk about that in Israel? What is a Jew? Law of return. What is a Jew?
Questions, because it makes demands of you.
No, the fact is demands. You understand from a reform route. See, you have to understand something from a Reform perspective. From an Orthodox perspective, you hear a Reform rabbi. This is you're a rabbi. Do you ever learn Shulchan Aruch? No. You're in Talmud? No. You're not Maritz. You're an ignoramus. If you speak to a Reform rabbi, they'll look to the Orthodox person and say, that guy studying in Kola there. Do you ever read Rosenzweig? Do you ever read Bulber? What does he know? What does he know about Herman Cohn? He's an ignoramus. How could you have to understand something. It's such a difference. There's a lot of Jews, you're right, there's a lot of Jews that are just lox and bagel. But when you get further into it, you understand that it's a sophisticated, different idea over there. Okay? I remember once talking to a guy, and he was saying something about Reform Judaism. I said, listen, you really don't know what you're talking about. Okay? There's this Reform route, they're doing a class over there. Why don't you go listen to it, just to hear what the guy's talking about. Come back and talk to me about it, right? And he went to this class, and this Reform rabbi says the two most important Jewish philosophers of the 20th century were Franz Rosenzweig and Martin Buber, right? So he said, I said, do you understand how powerful a statement is? If I went over to the Kollel of Rechem, walked into the Kollel and said, you guys, you ever hear of, Franz Rosenzweig or Martin Buber? I can see one of the guys, color guys, saying, Martin Buber, is that Moish Buber, the Shaitan? Right? The truth is that it's a you don't recognize that it's total difference. And the fact is that we're not dealing with, there's different definitions. That's what I want. But the fact is that's really the challenge. I talked about unity and so forth and so forth. You got to deal. If you want to deal with it, you got to figure out what is the unifying point. What are you trying to do in terms of the Jewish community? That's what we want to deal with. Doesn't matter. If you're going to ask questions, what's Reform, what's conservative? First, you got to say what's the Jewish. What are we talking about? What's the significant?
Speaking with Elise Goldstein, because I got to know her pretty well on the programs, and she's quite bright, and basically she explained to me, like in a nutshell too, she says that Orthodox Judaism believes in Torah Mishamayim, and they believe in the spirit of the law, but they don't believe that it's divine. It's maybe divinely inspired, is how she put it. So it's a whole different take, because then you really can pick and, like, literally can...
Right. Right, not only can you pick and choose, you must pick and choose. The truth matters, it's much more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, but it was her basic...
Yeah, because it really goes back to the argument between reason and revelation in the late 1700s, in the general philosophical issue at the time between reason and revelation. And what people don't recognize is the concept of Nasa and Nishma is exactly the concept that Reform Judaism on certain levels finds wrong. And people don't recognize it. What's worse is that Nasa and Nishma is totally misunderstood by the Orthodox as well. Because the simplistic way of understanding Nasa and Nishma is God tells you to do something without thinking, right? The argument of Reform Judaism is God would not want you to be a robot. Okay, God would not want you to be an idiot. Right? God's going to tell you something to do that's totally idiotic. That's not the God I want to believe in. Okay, and people are going to say, "Nasa and Nishma, you do it because of it, and who are you?" And therefore, God tells you, and I totally negate myself in front of God. The argument for Judaism is God won't want you to do that. God wants you to think. God wants you to work it out. So the truth is, Nasa and Nishma, if you ever really get into it, is not the way most people think about it. Nasa and Nishma, if you really investigate it, maybe we'll do some stuff like that. If you really investigate it, you'll find out that it's a much more sophisticated idea, and you have to ask the question of why did they understand that Nasa and Nishma was a highly intellectual, sophisticated response. That's why the Gemara in Shabbos says that when they said Nasa and Nishma, the Shemayim said, "Who revealed the secret of the Malachei Asharet to these people?" So a high intellectual concept.